As we seek to begin, I want to introduce the Honourable Dr. Nyan Gadsby-Dolly, Minister of Education, to do our feature presentation. Can we please stand to welcome the Minister?
Allow me to say from the onset what an absolute pleasure it is to have all of you here today. At what was not so much long notice, I don't want to say short notice, but it wasn't as long as we would have liked, but it was imperative for us to have you. So I want to thank you for being here today, to spend a little time with us as we discuss a topic that is near and dear to all of us, whither goeth education. And we are looking at our education policy 2023 to 27, and we are hoping to have a robust discussion with you, not just about that policy, but about the sub-policies which accompany it and other issues which you may want to bring to us as we look at education in Trinidad and Tobago. What's our why? That's the new way that people ask what your purpose is. I learned it a little while ago in a motivational speech, and I'm sure some of you may have encountered it. What's our why? And when I think about why we are all here doing what we are doing, I go back to the foundation of our nation. And I go back to those words spoken to young people by our first Prime Minister. And those words, to me, were so resonant in that time, but they're even more applicable to us today. So I want to take the time, though you can see it, I also want to say it, because I think it's important for us to say it, for it to resonate with us. The nation is on the march, and this is August 30th, 1962. The nation is on the march. There is no turning back. Your responsibility, therefore, is a very heavy one. And this is the Prime Minister speaking to our young people at that time. If you fail, you jeopardize our nation. I have given to the nation as its watchwords discipline, tolerance, and production. They apply to you, the young people. To your tender and loving hands, the future of this nation is entrusted. On your scholastic development, the salvation of the nation is dependent. I'm sure we all know these last words. You carry the future of Trinidad and Tobago in your school bags. So, with that background and context, given to us many years ago as a fledgling nation, what's our why? Why do we do what we do? Every day, get to school, deal with the issues, the myriad issues that arise. Deal with the children, the parents, the situations, the challenges. What's our why? Every one of us and everyone involved in the education sector should have one goal. And that goal is the scholastic development of our young people. And that's how we secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago. That's our why. And that's why we do everything that we do. And that's why we seek to surmount all the challenges that we have, because the future of Trinidad and Tobago depends on it and on us. Our greatest educational successes will be achieved when we pull together in the same direction. And I always think about a tug-of-war team when I think about this, because it takes effort to pull. It's not easy. And sometimes what you're pulling against is very strong and very heavy. But when you, and if you've ever, anybody ever did tug-of-war? Once or twice earlier. When you're on a tug-of-war team, there's usually someone corralling the team and saying, you go to the back, you are the anchor, you set in the front, and showing you how to place your hands on the rope and how to interlock so that when you start to pull, you get the effect that you want. And the other team may be very strong, and sometimes it's intimidating. But sometimes a team that doesn't look like they could win, wins because they have the right strategy. And most importantly, they are all pulling together. So pulling together to ensure the scholastic development of our young people, because on that, the future of our nation is dependent. Us pulling together, it requires certain things. It requires a shared vision. We must agree on our aspirations for the future. It requires clear goals. We must know the milestones that we have to achieve along the way to develop and to achieve that vision. There must be pellucid strategies. We must be clear about what we're doing. We must be clear about our roles and how we impact the achievement of the goals and eventually the vision. There must be collective motivation. We have to share a common passion for doing what we do. We have to have dogged determination because there are going to be challenges, and we are going to have to surmount them to get to our desired endpoint. Nothing good comes easy. We know this, but sometimes along the way we can get a little deterred, but we have to have dogged determination, and we have to have synergistic teamwork. Remember the analogy of the tug of war. If we are not pulling together in the right direction with the strategy, then our efforts may not yield the desired effects. So what's the role of the education policy? The policy is a valuable tool for us. It's a valuable tool for giving us that vision that we have to share, that vision for education. It tells us what our goals are to achieve that vision. It outlines the strategies that we are going to employ to be able to achieve the goals. And it tells us what our indicators of success. Those are very important because we must know what we are trying to achieve. And if we don't know that, then we can't go forward. Can you go back to the next slide, the previous slide, please? The education policy must align with the overarching policy for national development. It's important that we have synergy between what we are doing here in the education sector and how that fits in on the whole spectrum of our national development. We are not on a frolic of our own. We are part of a whole, part of a big picture, and therefore what we are doing in education must align with our policy for national development. So what is our current national development agenda? It's called Vision 2030. And theme 1 is putting people first, nurturing our greatest asset, and goal 7 of that theme states, Trinidad and Tobago will have a modern, relevant education and training system, and it speaks to the relevance that they are referring to and brings in the concept of positive values and behaviors being instilled in our young people that will allow us to be a progressive society. The vision of the Ministry of Education is aligned with the Vision 2030, as it must be. So on the left in the pink, it reminds us of what Vision 2030 says. And to my right, in the blue, it speaks to our vision of the Ministry of Education to provide modern, relevant, quality, equitable education for all. Very simple, very profound, very fundamental, so that we can all internalize it. And if we can't remember anything else, we should remember modern, relevant, quality, equitable. That's what we are striving, that's what we see us providing to the children of this nation. So we're here to discuss the national education policy that is underpinned by this vision for education in Trinidad and Tobago. This policy is our strategic roadmap. It says over the next 5 years how we're moving forward, 2023 inclusive. So it says that over the next 5 years, this is what we will be doing, this is how we'll be doing it, and it comes out of our discussions that we have been having with the wider public, our stakeholders, since 2020. And we have been discussing this. In 2020, we came to you on a national consultation. In 2021, we came with the findings of 2020 and refined it. And in 2023, we are having this conversation about what has come out of those discussions. For us to have effective implementation, we must have clearly defined policy statements. We must have inclusive stakeholder engagement. This is one of them, and throughout this entire week, we will be engaging with our stakeholders, including the general public. We must have conducive institutional, policy, and societal context. Things must be right for us to be able to implement the measures that are outlined in the policy. And we must have a coherent implementation strategy. And we are pulling together, we are all pulling together. So these things are important for us to all be on the same page with. Our policy is available on the website, and I hope that some, if not all of you, may have had the opportunity to take a look at it. But it outlines 8 strategic areas, and it is written in such a way so as to be easily understood, because we want everyone to be on the same page with regards to implementation. So there are 8 strategic areas. The first one is the amendment of the Education Act, and that involves that our legislative framework is reflective of our modern situation in education. Human resource development. That's improving the functioning of our human resource, which are our hands, our feet, our mouths. Our human resource is the key to any transformation in any organization. Equity and quality education underpins all that we are doing and speaking about, because it means that every child should have the opportunity to be well educated in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is the lofty vision which we are setting ourselves. And the policy explains how those strategies are formulated to achieve that goal over time. Curriculum reform, a big topic, lots of discussion on this in the consultations and in national conversation, looking at how we have to reform our curriculum to meet the needs of our citizens today. 21st century skills, very, very important, and everyone wants to ensure that we develop citizens with those skills to carry our country forward. Revitalization of TVET, technical and vocational education and training. Critical area, one that we have a lot of work to do to revitalize and re-energize. And so we have those strategies outlined as well. Harnessing ICT for digital transformation. Well, this goes, I think, without saying that we have been and we continue to focus on digital transformation at the Ministry of Education, as we are doing in the country. Again, the Ministry of Education must align with the national vision. Transition of learners through the education system. We want to ensure that our children are moving through their child stage into their adult stage with seamless articulation throughout our education system, and remove any challenges or blocks that our children are experiencing. And enabling student success. And this is where we look specifically at the student, knowing that if there's equity in the system, meaning that at any institution you can achieve your fullest potential, now looking at the students themselves who are in those institutions and how they are faring in terms of their ability to maximize on the opportunities that are presented to them. Because as we know, there can be a wonderful institution with everything offered, but if a child has particular challenges, they will not be able to capitalize on what is offered. So that last one, enabling student success, deals specifically with our students. So each of the areas, the 8 strategic areas outlined in the policy, come along with strategic goals and strategic objectives. And so what we have done is simply pull them out here so that you see them. But of course, if you have been on our website and seen the policy, you would see these there. And so this is simply a representation of what we have at the policy. So amendment of the Education Act to ensure that the legislative framework reflects a modern and high-quality education system. And we have 5 strategic objectives outlined there. You will see ECCE, including that in the Education Act. You will see, speaking about homeschooling, and we recently launched a homeschooling policy. You will see the private school registration. That's another important sub-policy that comes under the overarching education policy. Very important for governance of the education sector. Human resource development. Our goal here, again, is to look at the human resources across the board, not just our teachers and our non-teaching staff in the schools, but also in the back end of the Ministry of Education. Sometimes we don't fully understand that if that does not run correctly, then the front-facing part of the ministry, which would be the schools and the teachers, will have issues. So it's important not just to focus on the development of our teachers, our principals and non-teaching staff, but also the staff in the back end, IT department, communications department, finance, HR. All of these play important roles. And if they are not optimized, then the functioning of our schools will not be optimized. Yes, I said HR. Strategic objectives. We have 3 there in equity, under equity and quality education. 3 objectives. Again, this deals with the schools themselves, the institutions, and what they are offering, ensuring that across the board, they are giving the opportunity for any student coming into the school to get a quality education. So this is school focus, this equity and quality education. Curriculum reform, as you said, a hot topic in Trinidad and Tobago, and quite a number of strategic objectives under this particular area. And they deal with the 21st century skills, they deal with patriotism, they deal with values, attitudes, and behaviors that we want to inculcate in our students. It looks also at the formative and summative assessment frameworks. And that's very important, how we assess our children. And that comes into the whole discussion about SCA and what we do with SCA. National tests, you'd observed some changes there as well in how we are administering those things. All of this comes under the curriculum reform strategic area. We spoke about revitalization of TVET, and there are quite a number of areas, but the premier thing for us is to promote TVET as a career choice that students will choose. For quite some time, TVET has undergone this stigmatization, where if you can't take book, well, you will take a skill. But we have come a long way from that understanding, and it must be represented in the way we do the business of education in this country. So that's a big part of it, and everything that is put into this area has to do with the promotion of TVET as a viable career choice. Digital transformation, of course, so many things happening under this area, as it must if we are to offer modern, relevant education to our children. And it also impacts on our ability to offer equity, because as we digitize and digitalize, we are able to get the data that will inform us of what particular schools need help, what particular students in those schools, what are the particular areas we need to get into, and that will help us and go a long way in dealing with the equity of the educational offering at an institution, and also it will help us to enable the student success. So though this is one particular area, it is a cross-cutting area in the education policy. Transition of learners, we have 2 strategic objectives under here, and it is really to ensure that our students can take charge of their educational pathway, and that we have the information that is laid out in such a way that allows them to do so, and that we also have the articulation arrangements that will allow our students to move throughout our education system and take advantage of the investment. Too often, we hear students not being able to take advantage of opportunities. They didn't know about opportunities. It wasn't well presented. And there are some students who know, and they do take part in it. So as part of the equity, we have to ensure that this is well built out so that all of our citizens have the opportunities to transition and take advantage of what is given in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, enabling student success. We have 4 objectives, strategic objectives under this area, and it deals again with the individual students. Systems to monitor and identify students who need help. Digital transformation will help with that. Intervention strategies. Processes at the upper secondary level to reduce student attrition. Again, extremely important. We know that compulsory education is up to age 16. We know that there are some students who enter secondary school at advanced ages. We know that in some cases, those students do not choose to continue school once they've attained the age of 16. And we know the effects of that on our country. So a part of enabling student success is looking squarely at this question of student attrition and how we deal with that. So in the policy, you would see the development of the strategic areas, 8 of them, strategic goals. Each of those 8 areas have a goal. Then you will see the strategic objectives that we just saw outlined for the goals. And under those objectives, every one of the strategic objectives is followed by policy directions. And these give specific details of how we intend to achieve the objectives, which lead back to the goal and lead back to the entire area that we are looking at. So if you haven't taken a look at the policy yet, we encourage you to take a look, because there's a lot of detail, granular detail, in how those policy objectives are built out. And it came from the feedback that you would have given, and members of the public would have given, our stakeholders would have given in our consultations over 2 years. From the policy directions come sub-policy development. And this is a critical and ongoing area. And we'll take a look at some of the most important sub-policies, the newer ones that have come forward. But these are important because it formalizes the way we do business in Trinidad and Tobago. In the education sector, because it is so broad and so wide and there's so much to be done, over the years, when we had less schools, less teachers, and it was a much simpler system, some things were done just by out of course. People just did things in this way. And principals did things in that way, and teachers did that. And even in the back end of the ministry, things were just done in a certain way. And many of these things were not formalized. However, as time changes and people change and society changes, you see differences in the way things are being done. And not all of those differences are positive. And we realize that some of the things we have lost along the way, we've lost it because no one formalized how it should be done. Everyone thought at that time that that's just the way to do it, until we look now and take a look back and realize that we do things a lot differently now in some areas than we did before. Some of that is an advantage, and some of it is a disadvantage. And therefore, sub-policy development to go along to support and to underpin a policy is critical. because it means that when you leave and when I leave, there is something written that says this is how we do things. And even if that changes over time, it changes in such a way that it can be formalized and you can measure the effect of the change. Because what's happening now, and not just in education, I imagine it's a countrywide issue, but what's happening is that society is changing and lots of things are changing along with it. Therefore, we need to have policies and to be guided by policies so that we can monitor our success, we can monitor even our failures and challenges, and change our policies to suit. And when we leave our offices, we will leave it better than we met it. And the persons coming after will have a culture, a written, formal culture to fit into. That way, we risk much less slippage of our moral fabric in Trinidad and Tobago. So sub-policy development is a big part of what we do, and of course, then implementation. So we have some sub-policies that are existing, many of them. So you know the inclusive education policy, the National School Code of Conduct, very recently with the National Hair Code. But there are some new sub-policies that go along with this education policy 2023 to 27, and that work is ongoing. Sub-policy development. As we see areas that require formalization, we are going to build policies because, as I explained, it is critical for continuity and for monitoring what we are doing and the success of what we are doing. So we have the cultural transformation policy, patriotism policy, the homeschooling policy, the policy for registration of primary schools, digital transformation policy, the remedial education policy. And some of these you are very familiar with because they are already being implemented. And so, again, on the website, these policies are available for your perusal, your scrutiny, and of course, your internalization, because it is in internalizing and implementing together that the success of this will be seen. So 4 of the new sub-policies directly impact our school operations, the patriotism policy, and you will see underneath the policies what strategic area it comes from and the strategic objective that it relates to. So that's what those words underneath there mean. So we have 4 policies: patriotism, digital transformation, remedial education, and the cultural transformation through education policy. We'll just take a quick look at some of these and what are their goals and objectives. So the patriotism policy, of course, that's something that keeps buzzing around in our national conversation, that we are creating citizens who don't love their country. We recently had the cultural policy of Trinidad and Tobago launched, and it speaks to cultural confidence, and it speaks to ensuring that the citizens we are creating love Trinidad and Tobago and understand their responsibility to this country. So the goals will be listed there, and it really is to infuse what happens at the classroom in a formal way with our local content, local examples, patriotic songs, national songs. And some of you may say, but this is not needed. You don't need a policy to say that. And I can assure you that you actually do. Because again, the equity in education, that's what we are speaking about. Some children get exposed to it because some principals and teachers do it. Some do not. And that's what we are trying to, across the board, offer to our students, the opportunity to have these experiences regardless of what school they're going to, regardless of who the principal or the teachers are. Digital transformation, again, we have been engaged in this, and so you would have seen many things happening in your schools along the tenets of this digital transformation policy, and it really is to ensure that our system is modern, that we can prepare young people who are accustomed dealing with digital technology and strategies, because that is the world they are living in, and therefore we need them to be able to be very facile with this type of technology. And also, we need to engage young people who are using their phones, social media, digital technology all the time. So therefore, what we do as teachers must also change. In addition to that, the data that is required for our policy formation now must be acquired in a more facile way. It's very difficult to be able to inform policy with the rapidity that we have to if we are using manual systems. Very, very difficult. And therefore, when, for example, something as fundamental as what is the attendance of our children for today, when that question is asked, without a digital strategy, it's much, much more difficult to understand where our children are, who is not there, which school is having difficulty. It's much more difficult to do that if we don't have digital strategies. So it's more than just how we teach in the classroom. It is also the way we do education business, the way we perform, and how we are able to respond to challenges on a day-to-day basis. So the goals, we have about 13 projects that have been identified, and this was launched before, of course, so therefore we know that we have been involved in some of these projects. So the school learning management system, we know that we have been involved in that. The ebook platform, it has been quite a time of negotiation with that ebook platform. It's something very new for Trinidad and Tobago, but we hope to have some good results very soon. We've been working with iGovTT for maybe over a year, trying to get this into alignment, so we are looking forward to that. Of course, the student management system, and that system is dealing with our digital records for schools and for students. Again, very important. Just imagine the versatility of having all end-of-term exam data available so you can run a report digitally, so you can run a report and see where we have students with particular issues. It's very easy to run a report. As it is now, we at the head office would not know, unless we go into very involved methodologies, who are the students in your particular classes that are struggling? What resources have they been able to be exposed to? These are the kinds of data we can have, we can correlate, run reports to be able to help individual students. So that student management system and school data is very, very important, and we are on the way, well on the way to getting that digitized. You are familiar with the SIMS platform where you report infrastructural situations. Don't worry, we do see it. We do see it. I know that you all may think we don't. We do see it, and we may not be able to respond as we would like to. However, it is a very facile way for us to get the information, and when we have to run reports about what's happening at schools, that kind of information is critical for us. Devices, well, as you know, we have been on an ongoing drive to supply devices to schools, to students, and very recently you would have been receiving some of those. The means test is open as well, as we seek to ensure that all of our students have the advantage of a digital device, which is foundational at this point for their education in Trinidad and Tobago. Re-engaging for success. This is our remedial education program, again, that all of you would be familiar with. So even though we are launching the policy now, you would realize that we have been carrying out different parts of the policy even before this. And this re-engaging for success has different aspects. You would have seen, some of you, learning support assistants at your schools, new assignments of school social workers and guidance counselors at your schools. You would have seen us training teachers in remedial math, English, writing, all as a part of the remedial education policy. Restorative practices, you would have seen 11 schools in our pilot project looking at how we teach our children to deal with conflict and challenges differently as we work on the school discipline aspect of it. So all of this is under the remedial education policy, and of course, the vacation revision program, which took place in secondary schools last year, took place in primary and secondary schools this year, along with the after-school program, where we offer tuition and are continuing to offer tuition free to some of our students to assist with the learning loss situation. This is just a snapshot of the primary school vacation program, where they had the VAPA teachers and students, and as I heard, it was quite a success and a hit. The students were very happy to interact in that way. And this is a snapshot of the restorative practices. And this is something, after doing the 11 school pilot, that we hope to roll out into more schools as we seek to give our students the tools that they need to interact more successfully and to overcome conflicts and challenges more successfully rather than resorting to the negative behaviors we sometimes see going viral on social media. And of course, these are the goals of the sub-policy which we are implementing at this time. The cultural transformation policy would be the newest one to the bunch, and that is one that would have been engaging the conversation with teachers that happened in August and in earlier September, the same month, where we are looking at the type of citizen we are creating. And this comes under the curriculum reform area, strategic area of the education policy 2023 to 27. And it is speaking to the idea that we are educating, investing in education to create a particular type of citizen, not simply to have students get a particular academic qualification and so on. That's important. But we are seeking to create the type of citizen in Trinidad and Tobago that will drive our developmental agenda forward. That's what we are educating for. And therefore, we need to look at the type of citizen we are creating. If you paid attention to the crime symposium that took place, the regional crime symposium that took place in Trinidad and Tobago a few months ago, every prime minister that spoke, including ours, spoke to the role of education in creating the type of citizen that would not resort to crime as a first resort, that would not engage in certain types of negative behaviors. And all of them spoke to the fact that academic qualification is necessary but not sufficient for the holistic education of our children. And that is where this cultural transformation policy comes in. So you would have been exposed to it in the sensitization sessions, and this is what we are rolling out over the next 2 academic years to deal with the type of citizen we are creating, to create the ideal Trinidad and Tobago citizen. And the underpinnings of this sub-policy comes straight from Vision 2030, our national development agenda. And it speaks to the revision that is necessary in the school curriculum and the importance of emphasizing the values, attitudes, and behaviors that we expect to see in our citizens, the positive values, attitudes, and behaviors that will allow us to develop in the way that we want to. So the implementation takes place over 2 academic years, and this is where we want to expose all of our students to a range of mandatory school experiences. We want them to have those experiences to develop certain character traits and skills within their characters. So that is what will aid in developing the citizens that we want to see in Trinidad and Tobago. So it speaks to not just the academic achievements, but the moral, the physical, the culture and arts, which is the patriotism aspect of it, and the TVET. So you can see the cross-cutting themes that flow into these sub-policies as we look to school operations and how we do it differently so that we get a different result. Because as we all know, if we do the same thing, we cannot expect different results. What are the indicators of success we expect to see? We expect to see increased school performance, and that's based on our national learning assessments, and that's dealing with the school itself. So you would have seen a difference in the way we are doing the national tests because we want school-level data. We want to understand across the board how our schools operating. Are they offering the kind of experiences and the type of teaching that allow our students to achieve the average student? And so we are doing those random samplings based on international models of our schools. The increase in student performance, we will see that more clearly when we look at the results of the SCA, the CSET, the CAPE, and so we will know in those terminal examinations how our students are progressing and how they're comparing to the region as well. Decrease in student infractions. We want to see an increase in positive behavior, which will mean that there'll be a concurrent decrease in the number of suspensions and fights and so on that our students engage in. Decrease in student attrition. Again, we spoke about this, and so that will be an indicator that we are succeeding. Increasingly positive school climate. How students feel about their school, how teachers feel about their school, the way that the pride that students have in their school, that they have that sense of belonging. That's what the school climate survey measures, and we want to see an increase in the positivity there. Increase in parent, student, and teacher engagement, involvement in the school, and so on. Increased job satisfaction for teachers, principals, and non-teaching staff. Very important, because if we don't have motivated teachers, principals, and other staff, then that translates naturally into how they perform their jobs and how the students receive. And the wider benefits of an increasingly and more competitively educated society, that will filter into all sectors of the society, the business sector, the social sector, that will filter everywhere. The amount of crime we see in our country, these are the long-lasting or long-reaching effects of what we are discussing here today. So, of course, we want everyone involved. Follow us on our social media pages. We have Facebook, we have Instagram. Go onto our website, take a look at the policy, take a look at the sub-policies, and get involved. And there's a way to give us any feedback, recommendations, and we are happy always to get that from you, whether it is directly or through your different channels, because that is what allows us to ensure that the policies we are creating are applicable for all, and that they will do and are doing what they are supposed to do. But we must face the reality of implementation and manage our expectations. The transformation that we envisage cannot and will not be immediate. It will take place over a number of years, and we have to recognize that it will take time and consistent effort to be able to achieve the goals that we want to. It requires inculcation of values, attitudes, and behaviors. Therefore, it requires change of behavior and mindset, and that's not an immediate process. It also requires other supporting resources. So ongoing professional development for teachers and principals, classroom support, resources for implementation, monitoring, etc. As you see there, all of these things must go into the pot to be able to get the transformation we expect coming out at the end. It can't be just that you're not putting anything in and you're getting the results at the end. Above all, the success of our education sector and of our nation will be a function of how many hands are on deck. Education is everyone's business, and all hands need to be on deck to get the results that we want for our nation. And just to remind again, everyone involved in any aspect of the education sector, there's one goal that we are pulling towards, and that is the scholastic development of our young people, and that's in the broadest sense, not just the academic sense, the broadest sense, and that is what will secure the future of Trinidad and Tobago. That's the big picture that all of us have to have in our minds. And finally, again, we will achieve our greatest successes as a nation when all of us pull together in the same direction. I thank you.